Fantastic. So thank you all for joining this ScienceOpen webinar on open peer review on the ScienceOpen platform. Just a short introduction. I'm Stephanie Dawson, head of ScienceOpen, a discovery environment with over 68 million records for articles, books, chapters, data sets, and more. Integrated into the platform are tools that allow readers to recommend, comment on, and review any of those records. Today, I would like to explain to you how you can review a preprint, article, or book, and then give some examples of how publishers and researchers are using the open peer review system on ScienceOpen to change how we evaluate scholarly outputs. Let's take a step back and ask what actually peer review is meant to accomplish. Number one, the feedback from experts can help a researcher to improve their work. But that usually happens in a black box that readers have no access to. Most readers are left to infer or assume expert validation and endorsement of research results via journal brands and impact factors. And let's be honest, there's different economic implications for subscription and open access journals with regard to review and what actually gets published. And this validation provides researchers then with a shortcut for search and discovery and saves time and resources as they can read articles less critically. I do this myself. But this whole process of blinded peer review, repeated submissions, and long waits for publication is slow and costly, and has really been criticized for years now. The open science community has been working on new solutions to open up peer review for faster dissemination of knowledge. Bias in STEM publishing is also complicated, and our answer is really on ScienceOpen, maximal transparency. So ScienceOpen, we are exploring ways that open peer review can support discovery beyond journal brands. And any search result on the site can be sorted by average rating via the open peer review system on the platform, as well as by citation number, altmetric score, usage, date. So I think one of the really unique things on ScienceOpen is really this ability to change your how you're looking at the content, sort of change the sort order of your search results. Here you can see an example of this sort by average rating. On the article page, we also link to reviews as part of a full suite of metrics around each article and try and really highlight those reviews on the article page. Here's an example from a journal I'll talk about a little bit later, but you can see that we're talking about a preprint, and there's a number of reviews that are associated with this preprint. So I like to call it community peer review and really think about it in terms of how researchers can share their expertise on our platform. So some of the things that you can do, you can invite an expert reviewer for any preprint, article, chapter, or book. So even if you're not an expert, you can still really get involved. If you are an expert with 5 published articles attached to your ORCID, you can review any record on ScienceOpen. You can, if you have no time, you can still, with just one click, recommend any article on the platform. You can start a discussion via comments, or even create a collection of the best research in your field on ScienceOpen. So we really try to put tools in researchers' hands to explore community review of open content. The open peer review on ScienceOpen is integrated with Crossref and ORCID to make sure that you get credit for your contribution. Peer review reports are searchable and citable items that you can add to your ORCID profile or any other digital profile with one click. They have a DOI and a full set of metadata. You don't have to wait for an editor to reach out and ask you to review an article that's maybe about something you don't care about. You can decide yourself which articles are interesting to you, which articles you review and recommend. So if I've convinced you, then I would like to give you a little introduction on how to get started. The first step is to register on ScienceOpen and to link your profile to your ORCID account. To ensure that reviews represent an expert viewpoint, we require that reviewers have at least 5 published articles attached to their ORCID. More and more publishers require an ORCID at the point of manuscript submission or publication, so you may have one already. With ORCID, you can verify that you're the author. So I use this example a lot, but I have published a paper on Drosophila genetics and one about Goethe's Faust. So really no artificial intelligence system in the world is going to guess that those 2 papers are by the same author. To make sure that your articles are not assigned by discovery platforms like ScienceOpen to a different author with a similar name, get an ORCID. The next step is to add at least 5 publications to your record. You can add articles directly to your ORCID and then click on the refresh button to import that metadata into ScienceOpen. Or you can claim authorship of articles on ScienceOpen, and we will add those to your ScienceOpen and to your ORCID profile. So we'll write that content directly to your ORCID. It can be useful for others to know about your academic background or your institutional affiliation when you're reviewing, so really the context of your expertise. This is information that you can add to your ORCID profile, and we will import it to ScienceOpen. All of these services are available via the dashboard in your My ScienceOpen drop-down menu. And if you haven't authored 5 publications, but you feel you have the qualifications to review an article through other channels, or maybe you're working together with a mentor, then just get in touch with ScienceOpen, and we can also individually give researchers reviewer status. From any article page, you can click on the review button to review an article. As an author or reader, you are also welcome to invite reviewers. This can be particularly helpful for preprints, which have usually not yet been reviewed and are flagged on ScienceOpen with a blue preprint label. Any peer review that you do on a preprint is really portable. The author of that preprint can take that review and use it in the publication process. They can use that when they're submitting their manuscript to another journal. So you can help save time, and you can also provide information to the author that they can really build into the final version of their paper. We use a 5-star system on ScienceOpen to rate articles on 4 categories. Importance: is the publication of relevance for the academic community, and does it provide important insights? Does the work represent a new approach or new findings? We ask about level of validity, arguably the most important category. So is the hypothesis clearly formulated? Is the argumentation stringent? Are the data sound, well controlled, and statistically significant? Is the interpretation balanced and supported by the data? We ask about completeness. Do the authors provide or cite all information to follow their findings or argumentation? Do they cite all the relevant publications in the field? And finally, comprehensibility. Is the language correct and easy to understand? Are the figures well displayed and captions properly described? These 4 questions we developed together with a almost 100 researchers coming from all areas of scientific publishing, editors, authors, reviewers, and these are based on very standard questions that are used across the publishing industry. We particularly added the question of importance because these are used to help researchers orient themselves and understand if this is a paper that's worth their time to read. These are usually not used to say, oh, this isn't important. This data isn't important enough to make public. Then there's a space for a brief summary and a full report that can contain formatting elements, images, tables, links, and more. And finally, reviewers are requested to state any conflicts of interest. After clicking on the continue button, authors can reread the review and submit it if they're happy, or return to correct an error. And then you're done. Then the review is then automatically published on ScienceOpen with a DOI and can start gathering its own metrics. You can see that this article, this review here has over 1,000 views and is one of a number of reviews of this article. This was part of this article was also part of a peer review training that took place a few years ago. A number of publishers have started experiments in open peer review now based on the infrastructure built into the ScienceOpen platform. So I would now like to introduce you to some of those projects. UCL Press has been at the forefront of open access publishing since its inception in 2015. It's published over 180 open access monographs and manages 14 open access journals, and the publishing platform UCL Open based on a fully transparent workflow. The platform kicked off in 2019 with the subject strand environment, and the workflow is such that articles are submitted to UCL Open environment and undergo a basic editorial assessment for completeness before they are published on or posted really online as a preprint. Editors, but also authors and readers invite reviewers. Reviews are then posted openly online with the reviewer's ORCID. Authors can respond openly and revise their preprint. And a preprint may go through several cycles of review and revision before it's ready for publication. Once an editor approves the submission, it's professionally copy edited and typeset and published in a final version. Here's a view of the UCL Open Environment preprint collection, which currently has 16 manuscripts actively undergoing review. So if you're an expert in any of these fields, please join and write a review or invite a reviewer, get involved. You can see that the preprints have had to date 53 open reviews. You can see in the statistics bar at the top. Once a preprint is formally accepted by the editor, it graduates from the preprint collection to the publications collection. Here, and you can see here that 15 articles have been finally published now based on this open peer review workflow. Each article page displays its full version and review history. So there's a link between this here, the published version, and you can see this was preceded by 3 different preprint versions. The first version being reviewed by 2 reviewers. The second version got another review, and then there was a final preprint version that was then published in the final version. Another exciting project powered by a university press is the UNISA Archive preprint collection. So preprints really are very much a growing sector, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the critical need for rapid exchange of information. But of course, there's also a risk for researchers posting their manuscripts as preprints online of getting poor reviews. For manuscripts submitted by the University of South Africa affiliated researchers, the UNISA Press provides free copy editing before posting to the preprint collection. In this way, they can support their research community with language polishing and editing services to ensure that they really put their very best work out onto the internet for open review. Researchers outside of UNISA can take advantage of this service for $150 US. And you can support the University of South Africa by inviting reviewers or reviewing preprints yourself. You can see they have, at this point now, 2 preprints that have been through this system. So this is a brand new project since launching in February of this year. And we're really excited to be able to support them with this new idea. Especially, I think it's an interesting role for a university press and how that university press is relates to the outputs of the university and what kinds of extra services they can offer. Another project is Africa Archive. Africa Archive is a platform that aggregates preprints from or about Africa from multiple sources. So Africa Archive works with a number of partners, Center for Open Science, Zenodo, and also directly from ScienceOpen submissions. And all of these preprints can be reviewed in one space on the ScienceOpen platform. Again, this nascent project helping to promote research by African researchers could use your support with reviews or invitations or mentoring. So I think that there's a lot of ways that we can help these kinds of projects hit the ground running. Finally, I would like to mention the ScienceOpen researcher-led topical collections. So researchers can apply for editor status and set up a collection landing page with preprints, books, journal articles, and more. Reviews of any articles in that collection are highlighted in the metrics bar at the top. These collection pages could easily be used to create an overlay journal based on openly reviewed preprints, and we have nearly 2 million preprints on the ScienceOpen platform from a whole range of preprint servers from Archive, BioArchive, medRxiv, Center for Open Science, preprint.org. We have preprints from almost every preprint server out there, and if there's a particular preprint that you would like to add that's not on the ScienceOpen system yet, it's very easy. Just go to the dashboard and add that DOI, and we'll pull in the publicly available metadata and make a nice record as part of your collection. Beyond an overlay journal, you really can just highlight some of the most outstanding articles in your collection by reviewing them. Or if you have a really comprehensive collection, there might be articles that you want to warn people about and give those a poor review. So there's lots of ideas out there, and if you would be interested in creating a collection on ScienceOpen around your topic of research, please just get in touch with an email after the webinar, and I would be happy to help you get set up and create a collection that meets your needs. So I could talk about open peer review on ScienceOpen all day, but I'm going to end here so I have time for some questions. My take-home message is really peer review is the key feature of scholarly publishing. As researchers, editors, and publishers, you have an opportunity to actively experiment with open peer review on ScienceOpen and start changing the norms around research evaluation. Your feedback is greatly welcome, and together we can work towards opening that black box of peer review and speeding up the research process. As an aggregator of information, ScienceOpen will continue to open up, share, add to, and explore the context of scholarly research in support of open knowledge goals. So I hope you will join us. And now I would be very happy to answer any questions that you have around peer review. You can either put your question into the chat, or you can add that to the Q&A. I would be interested if anyone here at this webinar today has actually ever done any open peer review. Do you regularly sign your peer review reports? Somebody just asked, oh, and I see somebody saying yes. Great, good to hear. Even if you're reviewing for a blinded peer review journal, you can still often sign those reports or ask to ask the journal if it's possible for them to share your contact with the paper as authors. Somebody just asked if articles can be rejected or just receive a bad review. It depends on the. It certainly depends on the project. Most of the time on ScienceOpen, we have 68 million article records. So most of that peer review is happening after articles have already been published, after those preprints are already out in the open. So they are not usually rejected. Usually it's more the case that by having a bad review, they're being flagged as, somebody really needs to improve this research. In some cases, if the peer review were to show up extremely poor practices, then there would be a good case for retracting a preprint. And as part of COVID, the beginning in last March, when we really knew almost nothing about this virus, there was really so much research going on, and people were getting that information out there as quickly as possible. And some of those preprints were retracted at a later date. So that definitely can happen. Somebody else is asking about the idea of submitting a preprint reviews along with a submission to a journal, and whether, in my experience, journals readily accept these reviews. It certainly depends on the journal, but in my experience, nearly every journal is in a fierce competition for reviewers' attention. I'm quite certain that every editor of a journal has his contacts and knows whose opinions he values deeply. Nevertheless, being hand delivered some review reports together with the manuscript is certainly, I'm sure for most editors, actually very welcome, and can give them some signposts about where this article is heading. So I would, from my perspective, I think it would always be a great idea to deliver that kind of those peer reviews if you have them. Can the peer reviews be peer reviewed? That's a great question. On ScienceOpen, we don't have that functionality right now, and the reason for that is because at Crossref, that link, that kind of linkage between DOIs doesn't work. It's just recently, beginning at the end of last year in December, that Crossref actually made it possible to use a peer review XML schema for a DOI. So the idea is that DOI should say this peer review is of this DOI of this article. So being able to link those DOIs together. And until December, it wasn't even possible to link preprints and open peer review. There was only post-publication review opportunities for published articles. So that was something that we were also working together with Crossref on, and we're really excited that we now have that relationship available to us now. A peer review of a peer review isn't yet on the agenda, but as soon as it's available, we are happy to add that button to all of the reviews on ScienceOpen. Some of them are great, some of them are terrible. We do have a recommendation button, so you can recommend the ones that are good. You can add comments on the reviews, but we currently don't have that peer review function because of the Crossref DOIs. Somebody asked if I could share some positive testimonials or feedback on open review. They believe that any good quality work by an author must bring encouraging open review and also suggest ideas to improve, add, or correct in the future. One thing you can absolutely do on ScienceOpen is do a search and go to content type and search for all of the reviews that have been done on the platform. So it's somewhere over 250 reviews. And that's a great idea to gather some testimonials from some of those authors. We have had mostly very positive feedback from authors about this peer review process. And I will pass that on, especially to the UCL Open Environment Journal, because they have done certainly the most work on getting reviewers and encouraging that dialogue between reviewer and author in order to improve the paper for the next round and prepare it for publication. Are there other questions that I can answer? I have one here in the Q&A. So how much fear is there with the review being open, and do we see more senior people or more junior people doing it? I would say there is definitely more fear associated and more anxiety around this review process for junior scholars. They have a lot at risk and they have less experience, and it's always a bit of a tricky tightrope in terms of how to word that critique of a paper. With more senior researchers, we sometimes find difficulties with the technology. So people who have trouble logging in and then have difficulties with all of the with the technology, and in the end ask like, oh, can't I just send you an email? Can't I just do it like that? And that's really a challenge for us on our platform, because I think those more senior researchers are really the ones who, they have less to lose. They are they have a huge amount of expertise to share. They're incredibly valuable resources, and if you can get them to actually review something, you know, it's super fantastic. And then if they run into technical problems, then it can be very frustrating, and we still have to insist, because we want these reviews to be integrated with ORCID, get a Crossref UI. To have all of those systems work really require that somebody register on ORCID, and so we do sometimes find ourselves doing a lot of support work in that area. Somebody asked, reviewers may feel recognized by making their efforts and comments open. Do we see it as one possible solution towards a reviewer's crisis for various journals today? I really hope so, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to implement some of these kinds of open review processes, because there's a huge need for reviewers of content, and there's too few experts who can review that content. And nevertheless, those papers are getting submitted and rejected and submitted and rejected, and so the small amount of reviewer attention that we actually have is somehow getting wasted. And then on the other hand, there's newer, younger reviewers who are sometimes really hungry. They really want to show that they're a member of the scientific community. And sometimes journals get emails, often from researchers who are outside of the sort of top universities, global north, STM community, who are saying like, I would review, pick me, I'm an expert, I would like to share my expertise. And those reviewers are often, it's hard to know for an editor, what is their, how much expertise do they have, etc. So for those kind of researchers to be able to show off their skills, say, oh, look, I reviewed this paper openly, it's on my ORCID, to be able to show what kinds of reviews they can write, can be actually quite helpful, if you want to get picked up by the upper echelon of journals. And on the other hand, reviewers, if you say, okay, I can only review a certain number of articles, I'm an expert, but I, more than one article per week, is impossible with my time schedule. On ScienceOpen, you can at least pick out those articles that you want to review. So if you say, okay, I realize, I see that peer review is part of my commitment to the scientific community, but I actually want to decide which articles I review and not just get them randomly assigned to me. So I'm going to pick out a certain number of preprints, I'm going to review them, and I'm going to say, hey, people, this is what I did. I reviewed, and it's out there for you guys to do with it as you like. But that said, it's not easier to get people to do open peer review. So if you're thinking like, maybe that would be an easier way to run our journal, it's usually not. You have to run, you really have a lot of the same problems to get reviewers, but you have to convince some of those that it's worth it to review out in the open. Somebody asked if it's possible to publish the review openly but remain anonymous, and where do we see the benefits and limitations of this approach? On the ScienceOpen platform, it's not possible to remain anonymous if you yourself as a researcher just join join the platform and say, oh, pick an article that you want to review, pick a preprint or a book and want to write a review. Those require actually an ORCID account, and you're required to do that in your own name, because we can't police that all the time, and we really don't want the platform to turn into some kind of mudslinging fest. On the other hand, we have these projects that I showed you, where UCL, UNISA, and Africa Archive are managing those, have a kind of an editorial mediation there, and those editors can actually, from an institutional account, post an open review that doesn't show the name of the author. So it's possible, but only in on ScienceOpen, only in an editor-mediated situation. So if the editor says, okay, I can understand why, I can see this as a young researcher worried about his career, or for whatever reason, there is a way for the editor to say, okay, I'm going to post this review on behalf of this reviewer. Somebody also said that they that they agree that there should be, the reviewers should be encouraged to participate if it's open, and also that that's ORCID sync will be helpful. And it's true on ScienceOpen, anytime if you write a review, we automatically add that to your ORCID account, and so we have really ORCID and ScienceOpen talk to each other, so to really keep your workload to a minimum. So we really don't want people to have to type metadata in one field and another field, and we really try to, anywhere where computers can talk to each other, then let's let them do that. We have another question in the Q&A. Does ScienceOpen allow for import of articles from specific journals? So you have Simon has an OJS platform journal with the opportunity for post-publication open peer review. And yes, absolutely. So we do work directly together with journals, a lot of journals using OJS. We can import really rich metadata directly from the OJS system, put that in a nice collection landing page, so you have a place where you can show off that content, where you can show off those kinds of reviews, where the editors can invite those kinds of reviewers. I often think, I started out as a journal manager, so I saw some reviews where where the reviewer basically said, "Oh, looks okay enough, go ahead and publish it." And I saw some where the reviewer wrote a really beautiful analysis of the work. That was where even I, as a journal editor, learned something about like why that paper was important. And those kinds of reviews, it would be fantastic if, as a reviewer, as a journal editor, if you could reach out to that reviewer and say, hey, that was clearly a lot of work. That's a really interesting review that you wrote of this article. What if you post that online? And you could do it here on ScienceOpen. You'll get you'll get a Crossref DOI, and you can add that to your Publons account or to your ResearchGate account or to whatever other platforms that you're using. So I definitely think that there's that's a great use case for the ScienceOpen platform. We have a brand new journal that we just started fully on the ScienceOpen platform, the African Journal of Engineering and Technology, and they are working with a blinded peer review system. But going forward, we would really like to add, a checkbox, so that if the reviewer at any point in the process decides, hey, after that article is published, I would like my review to be published alongside of it. So whether that is whether that's at the very beginning of the process, because he always makes his reviews open, or whether that's at the end after the article's published and there's a nice version and he thinks, yeah, I actually would like to have my review associated with that. So there's some thoughts that we're doing of how we can sort of ease, sort of make a transition from blinded peer review to open peer review by giving really easy options to for researchers to just say, okay, I'm going to make this review open. Maybe this one I don't want to, but this one I would like to. So, and I know myself, I spent, I don't know, at least an hour reviewing a paper some time back, and when I saw on Twitter, I think, that it had been published, I thought, wow, well, I have that in a Word file on my desk. So I just published that on ScienceOpen. Just might as well get some credit for that hour of work that I did. Are there other questions that I can answer for anybody? I really appreciate all of your interest and your great input. I really would love to work with each and every one of you to, if you have questions about reviewing an article on ScienceOpen or setting up a collection, if you have thoughts about overlay journals or promoting your journal on ScienceOpen, if you would like to learn more about any of the publisher projects that are going on and get involved there, I'm happy to introduce you to the editors. And if you are yourself thinking as a librarian or administrator thinking, some of those ideas might actually also work for our institution, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I would be happy to set up a call and answer those directly. I have one more question here asking if we link reviewed preprints to the final published papers, and if we've thought about evaluating the impact of the review on the final published paper. So we do exactly that for the UCL. For the UCL articles, for example, if you just go to ucl.scienceopen.com, you can find a wealth of examples of how those peer-reviewed preprints are attached to the final published article. In that case, it's pretty easy for us because we know we're working together with them. We publish the preprint, we publish the final article, we publish the peer reviews. So it's all in one system, so we can really make that those nice connections there. It's much harder if those are preprints that we're aggregating from different systems, articles that we're aggregating from different systems, and reviews here and there. But one thing that we are working on is ways for researchers to say, oh, here's my final published article, and oh, I'm going to link it to the preprint. And the preprint had a peer review attached to it, so now I'm going to link these two DOIs on ScienceOpen. So right now, we're kind of assuming that the author themselves are the best place to do that. Certainly there's a lot of technology out there that's trying to bring those preprint and published article metadata together. I do think that there's a lot of there are some really great testimonials out there too from researchers who have particularly during the pandemic used preprint server for the first time, uploaded their article to medRxiv, bioRxiv, or arXiv, and had a really an open discussion on lots of different platforms, from Twitter and Facebook to Hypothesis and email, and really have gotten a lot of feedback on their preprint, made it better, and then really submitted that final better version to a journal. So I think that there's a lot to be gained by, trying it out, submitting a preprint, inviting reviewers, reviewing preprints yourself, and just experimenting with some of this technology. Thanks so much. Then I will wrap up the webinar. I really appreciate everybody for joining us today. And if you have any questions, then just get in touch. Looking forward to working with you sometime in the future. Bye, everyone.